Imagine you're a doctor looking at an X-ray of a broken arm. It's totally binary, right?
Right.
Like the bone is broken or it's not. The jagged white line is just right there on the fill.
Yeah, we naturally prefer things to be visible like that. Easily categorized. A clear physical fracture is, comforting in its certainty.
Oh, absolutely. But step into the world of medical research and epidemiology, and that X-ray machine just completely disappears. Suddenly, you're navigating this vast landscape of population data.
And it can be incredibly murky.
Yeah, it can easily mislead you if you don't know the exact lens it was gathered through. So, welcome to our deep dive. Today, we are custom tailoring our discussion for a very specific mission for you. We're going to master Lecture 5, Descriptive Study Designs from the Basic Course in Biomedical Research Review, which was compiled by Dr. Amit M. Shah.
And our goal today isn't just to help you memorize a list of multiple choice answers for a test. I mean, if you want to properly interpret medical data in the real world, whether you're a student, a clinician, or just someone reading health news, you really have to understand the architecture behind these study designs.
Right. Knowing the why is way more important than just memorizing the what.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this. Before we get into the granular details of different studies, we have to establish the broad strokes, like what actually separates a descriptive study from an analytical study.
Well, the terms kind of give it away, but
Yeah, I like to picture it this way, actually. A descriptive study is like a journalist reporting a breaking story. They are on the ground gathering the basic facts, the who, the where, and the when.
I love that analogy.
Right. And then an analytical study is the detective coming in weeks later, looking at those facts and trying to figure out the motive. The detective asks the ultimate question, which is, why?
That framework perfectly captures the fundamental division in epidemiology. Descriptive studies observe and document the distribution of a health problem.
Just the facts.
Just the facts. Analytical studies take the next step. They compare groups to test hypotheses about cause and effect.
Okay, let's test that journalist versus detective idea against question 6 from the review. It asks, descriptive epidemiology study designs can answer all of the following questions except T, and the options are A, who, B, when, C, where, or D, why.
Well, the journalist gathers the who, the when, and the where. Answering why requires testing a hypothesis and exploring the underlying causes.
Which is the detective's job.
Exactly. That pushes you out of the descriptive realm entirely and into the analytical territory. So the answer is definitely D, why.
Gotcha. That brings us directly to question 11, which is pretty similar. It asks what a researcher can assess by conducting a descriptive study, again, looking for the exception.
Okay, let's hear the options.
The choices are except TT, A, population, B, period, C, risk factors, or D, place distribution.
We can apply the exact same logic here. Population represents your who. Period represents your when. Place distribution is your where.
So it's risk factors.
Right. Identifying risk factors means you're actively looking for associations. You're trying to figure out what caused the disease to happen, which is an analytical function. So the answer is C, risk factors.
Makes sense. To figure out a risk factor, you usually have to look at people who have the disease and people who don't, which implies like comparing groups.
Exactly.
And descriptive studies aren't really built for that, which leads right into question 5. It asks, which of the following is wrong about descriptive study designs?
Okay.
The options are A, describe the study outcome for one group. B, compare the study outcomes for two group. C, calculate the incidence for surveillance data. Or D, calculate prevalence for cross-sectional study.
Well, comparing the study outcomes for two distinct groups, like a group exposed to a chemical versus a group that wasn't, that's the defining characteristic of an analytical study.
Not a descriptive one.
Right. Descriptive studies generally look at a single group to describe what is happening within it without trying to manufacture a control group for comparison. So the wrong statement is B. Compare the study outcomes for two group.
Let's solidify this idea of comparison with question 7. It asks which one of the following study designs does not employ comparison groups to answer the primary study objectives.
Okay, what are the choices?
We have A, cross-sectional study, B, cohort study, C, ecological study, or D, clinical trials.
Think about the mechanics of a clinical trial. You give half the patients a new drug and half a placebo.
That's a built-in comparison.
Exactly. A cohort study follows exposed and unexposed people over time. Another inherent comparison. Even an ecological study, which looks at whole populations, routinely compares different countries or cities against one another.
Oh, right.
But a pure descriptive cross-sectional study is just observing a single population at a single point in time to measure the burden of a disease. Its primary objective isn't comparison.
It's just taking a reading of what exists right now. So
Yeah.
the correct answer is A, cross-sectional study.
Spot on.
Here's where it gets really interesting. We've painted the big picture, so let's zoom all the way in. Let's look at the absolute smallest unit of observation, which is the individual person.
The micro level.
Yeah, and it amazes me how a single, highly unusual medical anomaly in one patient can just launch an entirely new field of scientific research.
That is really the bedrock of clinical discovery. The moment a doctor sees a manifestation they've never encountered before, thoroughly documenting it becomes a vital service to the broader scientific community.
Let's see how the review tackles this concept. Question 14 presents a scenario where a clinician comes across an unusual presentation of a particular neurological disorder.
Okay.
If the clinician describes this single case in detail and publishes the same in a journal, then it will be called, and the options are A, case report, B, case series, C, ecological study, or D, cross-sectional survey.
The operative phrase to focus on there is single case. A detailed presentation of one individual patient's unique clinical journey is defined as a case report. So it's a case report.
The review really hammers this definition, honestly. Question 23 essentially asks the same thing. A detailed presentation of a single case, which is rare and unfamiliar, is called long, and it gives options including case report, case series, ecological, and cross-sectional.
And once again, it's just a case report. Examiners rely on that kind of repetition to ensure you've internalized the core definition. One patient, rare presentation, it is always a case report.
Right, but what actually qualifies as rare or unusual enough to be reported? Like question 9 asks, case reports can include presentation of, and the choices are A, unique feature symptoms of a disease, B, rare manifestation of common disease, C, new or unfamiliar diseases, or D, all of the above.
Well, a case report isn't limited to discovering a brand new, previously unknown virus.
Sure.
If a patient comes into a clinic with a standard common cold, but it presents in a bizarre, clinically unique way that defies expectations, that absolutely warrants a report.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it generates hypotheses about the disease's mechanism that other researchers can test later. So it's D,
Yeah.
all of the above.
Okay, now, what happens if that same doctor sees not just one patient, but a handful of patients with the same weird presentation?
Then we're scaling up.
Right. Question 27 sets up this intriguing scenario. It says, in a medical journal, 18 cases of Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease were reported from a tertiary care hospital in Sikkim. The authors gave a description of the sociodemographic, clinical, and laboratory features of the 18 patients. What best describes this study design?
And the options.
A, case study, B, case series, C, case control study, or D, ecological study.
The number 18 is the massive giveaway here. It is larger than a single case report, but notice that they aren't comparing these 18 sick patients against a healthy control group.
They're just describing them.
Exactly. They are simply describing a sequential group of patients who all share the same condition. That elevates it from a report to a case series. So the answer is B, case series.
Got it. So question 1 asks, study design useful for describing uncommon clinical manifestations. Is it A, case reports, B, case series, C, both A and B, or D, ecological study?
Well, since both reports and series deal with these rare anomalies, just at different scales of one versus many, the answer has to be C, both A and B.
Okay, they're the frontline tools for investigating the uncommon. But I actually struggled with question 25 on this point.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It asks, which of the following is not applicable in a case study? The options are A, clinical features, B, laboratory parameters, C, sociodemographic background, or D, incidence. Why can't we measure incidence in a case study? It seems like a pretty basic metric.
Let's break down the math of epidemiology for a second. Incidence is strictly defined as the rate of newly diagnosed cases developing over a specific period of time within a population that is at risk.
Okay, a rate.
Right. To calculate any kind of rate, you mathematically require a fraction. You need a numerator, which is your new cases, and you need a denominator, which is your total population at risk.
Oh, I see where this is going.
In a case study, your total population is exactly one single patient. You cannot calculate a population-wide rate from an N of 1.
That makes total sense.
You can describe their labs and their demographics all day long, but calculating incidence is mathematically impossible. So the answer is D, incidence.
Okay, we've looked at the absolute micro level with the individual case report. Now I want to hold the camera all the way back to the macro level.
Let's do it.
Imagine you're looking out the window of a commercial airplane at, like, 30,000 feet. You can see whole cities, sprawling agricultural landscapes. Maybe you can guess the general climate.
Right.
But from up there, you cannot see what an individual person down in that city is eating for breakfast.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of study designs, that analogy perfectly captures ecological studies. In these studies, the unit of analysis is the group or the population, never the individual.
Never the individual. Okay, question 12 phrases it like this. The following study design provides group exposure and group response outcome without knowing the individual exposure and response for a specific health problem.
Let me guess the options.
Yeah, they are A, ecological study, B, cross-sectional survey, C, case report, or D, case series.
The key word you should be listening for there is group. An ecological study relies entirely on group-level data. It doesn't know if the specific individual who is exposed to a risk factor is the exact same individual who eventually developed the disease. So it's an ecological study.
To give an idea of how big these groups can get, look at question 26. To determine the association between air pollution and male infertility, data on air quality index and prevalence of male infertility was collected for 183 countries for the year 2019.
That's a massive scale.
Right, 183 countries. The question asks what best describes the study. A, case study, B, case series, C, ecological study, or D, cross-sectional study. Researchers aren't interviewing individuals across 183 nations.
No, they're pulling from massive national databases. They are taking the average air quality of an entire country and comparing it to the overall infertility rate of that same country and seeing if those two data points move together. That is a textbook ecological study. The answer is C, ecological study.
So if we test our comprehension with question 24, which asks, which of the following is incorrect about ecological study? The options are A, it is a descriptive study, B, it relates rate of a disease and exposure, C, it uses individual level data, or D, it helps in generating hypothesis.
Well, based on your airplane analogy, you know you can't see the individuals on the ground. Ecological studies never use individual level data. So stating that it does use individual data is the incorrect statement. It's C. It uses individual level data.
But they must have some real utility, right? Like question 10 asks, advantage of the ecological study is, and options are A, relate rate of disease and exposure, B, useful to test hypothesis, C, useful to study rare diseases, or D, all of the above. Why wouldn't it be useful for testing hypotheses?
This touches on one of the most famous traps in all of public health research.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's called the ecological fallacy. Because you only have group data, you might assume a direct correlation that doesn't actually exist at the individual level.
Give me an example.
Going back to the air pollution example, a country might have high overall air pollution and high overall infertility. But without individual data, you don't know if the specific people breathing the smog in the industrial centers are the ones experiencing infertility. The infertility could be entirely clustered in a rural, unpolluted area of that same country.
Wow, okay.
Because of this built-in flaw, ecological studies are great for generating a theory, but they are not robust enough to definitively test one. Testing requires rigorous individual-level analytical designs.
So their main advantage is just relating the big picture numbers.
Exactly. So the correct option is A, relate rate of disease and exposure.
Okay, we've done the deep biography with case reports and the bird's eye view with ecological studies. Now, I want to introduce the concept of pausing time.
Okay, like a photograph.
Exactly. Imagine you have a giant camera and you take a massive photograph of a population exactly as they are in this very second. Who is sick right now? Who is healthy? Who smokes? Who exercises? You capture it all in one single frame.
This brings us to the cross-sectional survey. It's one of the most common study designs you will encounter in public health. It is an observation of a cross-section of a population at a single frozen point in time.
So question 8 asks, unit of observation in the cross-sectional study is, and the options are A, individual, B, family, C, community, or D, population. We aren't up in the airplane looking at whole countries anymore.
Right. Unlike the ecological study that aggregates data before analyzing it, a cross-sectional survey actually sends out questionnaires or physically examines individual people to build that comprehensive snapshot. So the answer is A, individual.
Let's look at its main purpose. Question 4 asks, which one of the following is useful to measure the burden or magnitude of a disease or risk factor? The choices are A, case control study, B, cross-sectional study, C, case report, or D, case series.
When you hear researchers talk about measuring the burden or magnitude of a disease at a given time, you should immediately think of that snapshot.
Right.
You want to know the prevalence, how much of the disease exists right now in the population. The cross-sectional study is the specific tool designed for that. So it's B, cross-sectional study.
This is a major theme in the review material. Question 13 asks essentially the same thing in a different context. Which of the following study design will be helpful if the Department of Health wants to know the burden of a particular disease?
And let me guess, the answer is cross-sectional survey.
You got it. The options are A, ecological, B, cross-sectional survey, C, case series, or D, case report. The answer is B, cross-sectional survey.
Yeah, if a local public health department needs to figure out how many specialized diabetes clinics to fund in a city this year, they rely on a cross-sectional survey to tell them the current real-time burden of the disease.
It's an incredibly versatile tool. Question 2 asks, cross-sectional studies are used to A, estimate prevalence, B, generate hypotheses, C, describe trends, or D, all of the above. If I'm taking a giant picture of everything happening right now, I assume it can do all of those things.
It can. So the answer is D, all of the above. And when the text says it can describe trends, it usually refers to conducting iterative cross-sectional surveys.
Iterative, like multiple pictures.
Right. Taking a snapshot this year and taking another snapshot next year to see how the overall prevalence shifts over time.
Okay. Question 3 is a straightforward true or false. In a cross-sectional study, we can observe one or more outcomes. A, true, B, false.
That's A, true. A snapshot captures everything in a frame. You can observe if a person has diabetes, hypertension, and asthma all at the exact same time. You aren't limited to looking for a single disease.
But there are strict limits to what that frozen snapshot can tell you, right? Like question 22 asks, all the following are true about cross-sectional survey, except TA. Individual is the unit of observation. B, involves only incident cases. C, estimate the burden of a disease, or D, it can be used to generate hypothesis.
Let's untangle the terminology here because this trips people up. Incident cases refers exclusively to newly diagnosed cases occurring over a specific time period.
Okay, new cases.
But a photograph doesn't know when you got sick. It only captures the fact that you are currently sick. It lumps together the person who was diagnosed yesterday with the person who was diagnosed 10 years ago.
Oh, okay.
That combination of old and new cases is called prevalence. Therefore, claiming that the survey involves only incident cases is false. So the exception is B, involves only incident cases.
This snapshot limitation creates a fascinating logical dilemma, actually, which is highlighted in question 28. Which of the following is false about cross-sectional studies? A, can be used to generate hypothesis. B, can be used to establish temporality of association. C, can be used to estimate disease burden. Or D, can be used to identify factors associated with outcome.
The false statement is that they can be used to establish temporality of association. Because you are measuring the exposure and the outcome at the exact same instant in time, you face the classic chicken or egg problem. So the answer is B. Can be used to establish temporality of association.
Right, because if you look at your snapshot and see a patient who has severe obesity and also has diabetes, you have absolutely no idea which one came first. You can't establish the timeline or the temporality.
Exactly. And if you cannot establish the timeline, you cannot definitively prove cause and effect. You don't know which event preceded the other.
Now here is where the review introduces a bit of a twist. Question 30 asks, which of the following studies can be used to identify the factors associated with an outcome? A, descriptive cross-sectional study. B, analytical cross-sectional study. C, case study. Or D, case series.
Right.
The correct answer here is B, analytical cross-sectional study. But wait, didn't we establish way back at the beginning that cross-sectional studies are descriptive?
We did, yeah. This is where real-world research blurs the rigid textbook definitions. A basic cross-sectional study describes prevalence. However, once researchers have gathered that massive snapshot of data, they almost always divide it up to look for associations.
Like comparing groups within the picture?
Exactly. For example, they might look at the snapshot and compare the prevalence of lung cancer in the smokers versus the non-smokers. When you create internal comparison groups within that cross-sectional data, it functionally becomes an analytical cross-sectional study.
Wow, okay. That context actually clears up a really confusing true-false question. Question 29 states, descriptive cross-sectional study does not have a comparison group. A, true, B, false. Now, based on the very first few questions we covered, descriptive studies don't have comparison groups as their primary goal.
Right.
But the correct answer in the review is B, false, meaning it's false to say they do not have a comparison group. I was initially really tripped up by this.
It is a tricky nuance, definitely meant to test your understanding of how these surveys actually function in practice.
Yeah.
While the primary goal of a purely descriptive cross-sectional study is just reporting prevalence, these surveys inherently collect data on multiple variables like gender, age, or lifestyle behaviors.
Which you can compare.
Right, because that data naturally allows for internal comparison groups, making an absolute statement that the design does not have a comparison group is considered false in this specific academic context.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? We just mapped out the core concepts behind, 23 incredibly specific multiple-choice questions on descriptive study designs. But as we promised in the beginning, this isn't just about passing a test. It's about understanding the foundational architecture of medical data.
Knowledge is most valuable when understood and applied. You aren't just memorizing definitions anymore. You now understand the mechanics, the strengths, and the critical limitations behind each methodology.
Yeah, and I want to leave you with one final thought, something to take with you well beyond the exam room. The next time you are scrolling on your phone and you see a flashy news headline claiming a certain food causes a disease or a certain habit guarantees longevity, pause and ask yourself, was this just a single case report blown totally out of proportion?
Was it a frozen snapshot in time that couldn't prove what came first?
Was it a bird's-eye ecological view riddled with the ecological fallacy, or was it a true analytical test? Because as we've learned today, the detective doesn't always write the headline. The design of the study dictates the truth of the headline. Good luck with the rest of your review, and keep digging deeper.